And we're moving into the last section of our afternoon. I'd like to ask Mr. Mike Graninetti, Professor Mike, as well as Stephen Manley from EMC to come up on the stage.
So how are we doing out there, okay? We got enough energy to get through one more good discussion? Right? Good.
What if it's not good?
So I have to apologize. I don't know how many March Madness fans there are. The only mistake we made is we just missed the Louisville-Wichita State game. It looks like Wichita State lost steam in the end and lost by 4. So Louisville's going on to the national championship on Monday night. I got to see a TV for the Syracuse-Michigan game, or I'm gonna go on a withdrawal. All right. Well, listen. I am very pleased to have sitting on my right Stephen Manley, who's the Chief Technology Officer of. I think I'm gonna wait just a minute, guys, because we've got a lot of activity in the back of the class there. Just let me wait 1 minute to get everybody settled in. All right. So it's my pleasure to bring Stephen Manley from EMC Corporation join us today. Stephen is the Chief Technology Officer of EMC's Backup and Recovery Services Business Unit. Now, EMC is another one of those companies like Intuit that very few people know because it's not a consumer brand, but just a few facts about EMC. $50 billion market capitalization, $25 billion in revenue, 60,000 employees, operating in 86 countries around the world. Truly a global corporation. And I think it's very timely to have us sit here right after the panel on Russia, China, and Africa, because part of Stephen's portfolio of responsibilities where products get developed are in Russia, China, and India, as well as in Israel and in Ireland. So we'll spend quite a bit of time talking about innovation in all of those different global locales. A couple of other things that we can say quickly about EMC. They are one of the biggest beneficiaries of big data, of Instagram, of video on demand. What EMC does is they store and back up data. They love big data. They love video on demand. They are absolutely thriving in this new world era. They have been named one of the most innovative companies in the world. They were rated one of the most admired companies in the IT space by Fortune magazine. So it's the company that many of you may not know, but you will, I think you, more than you can imagine, you're using their products right now. Anybody that's accessing the web on your mobile phone, you're accessing the cloud. And it's probably being stored somewhere on an EMC device. So Stephen, interesting history. You came out of Harvard. You studied computer science at Harvard. It's like one of my buddies who went to MIT to study political science. A bit of a counterintuitive choice.
What's MIT?
It's some small community college somewhere in Massachusetts.
That makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. But you have a very interesting role, right? You are the Chief Technology Officer of the EMC. Now, backup and recovery software is rocket science. It's actually very complex. It's very mission critical. And the world is moving at 1,000 miles an hour, and it's an area which has always attracted a lot of startup activity. So every day there's 100 new startups in garages around the world trying to outmaneuver you guys. So you shared with me a couple of interesting things about how you spend your time. Very nice, 25% pie chart. Can you explain to our audience how you spend your time?
Sure. So before I dive in, so we talked about big data. So when you think of EMC, you really want to think of us as, we're the infrastructure. Right, so think of a lot of what you do in your life, right? You plug stuff into the wall, you expect electricity. You flush a toilet, you expect it to flush, right? I've never been to Ukraine, but I'm hoping there too. I'm just saying. See, I want to make sure you're awake. But EMC is really technology infrastructure. So there's a reason you haven't heard of us. So when you store lots of data, that's got to be stored on disk drives somewhere. Disk drives are generally not that reliable. EMC turns what are fairly unreliable media into something that when you need to get to your data, it's there. EMC also does the security, so that the photo that you have of yourself that you don't want anyone else to see, you make sure nobody else can see it. EMC is also 80% owner of VMware, so if you've heard of server virtualization, 80% of that was an EMC acquisition that then was spun out. If you haven't heard of VMware, you really need to hit your classes. So EMC is your infrastructure. Within that, backup and recovery is sort of the infrastructure's infrastructure, the insurance of the infrastructure. So imagine that at some point, you made a mistake and you lost something, right? You were working on some sort of document, a PDF, a Word document, PowerPoint, whatever it is, and you did something dumb to it, right? You deleted it, or you made a bunch of modifications that you realized that had you been sober, you clearly would not have made. And you want to get that back. Well, that's what backup and recovery is all about. Let's get your infrastructure back up and running. And the reason that's important is the more that you can make that transparent to people, the more that you trust that whatever you're going to need is going to be there when you need it, the less cautious you get. And we talk a lot about how big companies aren't innovative. One of the things that slows down big IT departments at their core is, I'm afraid to make change. Because if something goes wrong, the infrastructure is going to go down, I'm not going to be able to take sales, I'm not going to be able to help customers, I'm going to be down for 48 hours, and if I'm the IT guy that caused that, that means I'm now looking for another job. So there's layers and layers of change management specifically put into place to prevent someone from making a mistake. If you know your safety net's there for you and you're going to be fine, a lot of those restrictions go away and you get a lot more agile and you move more quickly. So that's really what the heart of backup recovery is how do I make sure that you know your data is going to be safe when you need it so you can do the things you need to do to grow and expand in your company. So that's what we do. That's how we look at the world is how do we accelerate the rest of business by making sure everyone's safe. Now within that, what's my job? So my job is really, again, I divide it into quadrants. So I wake up in the morning, I think to myself, all right, I'm going to spend about 25% of my time with customers. That's either with our sales teams or directly with end customers. And EMC has obviously, when you got a $20+ billion revenue rate, you're dealing with some of the biggest customers in the world, right? The Bank of Americas and those sorts of companies. We're talking the biggest of the biggest of the big. So we go out there, and so I spend about 25% of my time working with those customers, understanding what their infrastructure challenges are and how we can help them accelerate their business. Spend about 25% of my time then with product managers, trying to help them, frankly, A, understand what the customers are telling them, and then B, translate that into requirements that engineers can understand and deliver on. Because the death knell of any product is you get a spreadsheet listed, full of features, go do X, Y, Z, and the engineers go dutifully implement it without having any idea why the customer asked for it. Recipe for failure. If you don't know what problems you're solving, all the creativity, and you come up with something that, yes, exactly hits the mark of what was written on the paper, but completely misses the spirit of what the customer wanted. The next 25% of my time I spend with outbound marketing, and it's about telling stories. Right? A lot of what being a CTO is, and a lot of what being a marketeer is how do you tell a story so people connect with what you do? Because again, if I come to you and say, we sell large racks of disk drives strapped together with high margin software to tie it all together so that you can pay significant amounts of money for stuff that no one has any idea what it does, and why it's there, that story is a heck of a lot less interesting than we accelerate your business because we make sure your data is there for you so you can do what you need when you need to do it. So how do you tell the story? And then the last 25% of the time I spend with the engineers, making sure that we're architecting the products in the right way so that they can, frankly, build not only what's right for today, but 3 years from now when the product has to evolve dramatically because the cloud has exploded on the scene, or server virtualization has expanded in some significant way, or big data is suddenly the talk of the town. You don't want to be caught effectively with your pants down saying, yeah, we built the product in such a way that there's no way it can grow into these new markets. So that's kind of how I spend my time.
So when I think about the challenges that you face, I think about how you keep ahead at the pace that your part of the market's moving at, right? So let's try to deconstruct this. EMC talks about the golden triangle, the organization, you guys, you have a lot of internal innovation competitions, universities for tech transfer and licensing, and of course the venture capital ecosystem. Now you guys have spent $35 billion in the last 10 years on acquisitions, right? As we transition from atoms to bits. You know, that's why you bought VMware, one of the most successful companies in history. That's why you bought RSA. So you were becoming a software company over time. You were a programmer, computer developer, so obviously that's the skill you bring in. So you've got these three different tribes. And at the same time, you've got all these operations all over the globe, in all the countries we mentioned. How do you possibly make sense of all of these different variables where you actually have to deliver a product that works on time in a dynamic environment? That's an incredibly challenging balancing act to strike.
It is, and I think the biggest thing that you ever evaluate in any of these scenarios is, in the end, it's really all about the people. No matter what you're looking at, if you don't have the people right, you're dead. I remember, early on in my time in EMC a couple of years ago, I went out to DC, and I was meeting with a 3-star general of IT. I didn't know they had 3-star generals of IT, but they do. And so we're talking about some of his projects, and he said, I appreciate where you're going with backup, and I love the vision, but the big thing I'm worried about is this project going to succeed? Of course the project is going to succeed. It's the right technology. Look, we got the right vision. We're building the right products. This is going to be awesome for you. And he said, let me explain something to you. Over half of our IT projects in the U.S. military fail. Over half. He said, now here's the thing, right? It's not because we buy bad technology. We got smart people who figure out what technology we need to buy. We're not making bad choices most of the time. It's not because we're picking bad vendors to partner with. We're picking the best of the best, right? We're the U.S. military, and we are not going with, fly-by-night and seat-of-the-pants type companies. We're going with serious, meaningful companies that have shown success over and over again. And it's not because we have bad people. I got really, really smart people working for me. So you know why most of my projects fail? Because the people aren't bought in. If people don't believe in what we're trying to do, I don't care what the technology is, I don't care how smart you are, I don't care about your ROIs or your company history, you're going to fail. And so when we look at building products, because I'll tell you, the ideas are not the hard part. Coming up with smart ideas, those come in from everywhere. The hard part is, how do I turn ideas, as we call it, how do I move from the ivory tower of really great ideas to getting your hands dirty and actually building products and solving real customer problems? If I can't get organizations to buy into what we're trying to build and why we're trying to build it and I get their energy unleashed, there's no point. And that's true whether you're buying a company. If I buy a company, if I look at a company, and the first thing they look at is, if you buy us, it's a failure for our company. And I tell you, there's startup CEOs who think that way. If I sell, I'm selling out, and this is a failure. That's a problem. If I get an organization, and I'm working with a university, or I'm working with hires in another location, and they don't view that the central mission we're trying to drive towards is what their mission is, that's a problem. So you've got to get everybody pulling on the same page, and it's more important now than ever, because at least, when you're a small company and you all sit 6 cues from each other and there's a disagreement, you can go out to the parking lot and you can beat the living hell out of each other until you agree on what the answer is. If you're working separated by thousands of miles and cultural boundaries and language boundaries, it's really easy for someone to sit there and say, I completely disagree with you, and I'm going to subvert your entire project, and you have no idea that's what I'm thinking right now, because I'm nodding on a telepresence. You've absolutely got to make sure they buy in. And if they don't buy it, and if it's not part of the mission, you have to then sell, sell, sell. And if you can't make that happen, then you have to basically, frankly, cut weight.
So you're the CTO. CTO, you own vision, you own architecture. You work across a very complex organization. You've got a central innovation group, which we'll talk about in a second. You've got centers of excellence. You've got the office of the CTO. You've got many things. So there's a lot of alignment challenges that come with that. But at the end of the day, you're talking to a Russian, a Chinese, an Indian, an Israeli, or an Irish or European entrepreneur, and you think they've got something that you can't make as quickly, as effectively. Right now, that's a hard sell, I imagine, internally sometimes, because some of your guys and women probably have a sense of pride about, I can do this, boss. How do you strike that balance where your team doesn't feel like they failed, and you bring in that entrepreneurial team into your venture, regardless of where they may have been originated, and you make them a part of your team, and you make them a part of the EMC solution? How does that work?
So there's a couple pieces. So the first one is, I tell you, anytime you acquire a best-of-breed company, the internal sale goes about 8 billion times easier than if you buy, off the bargain rack and you say, no, we're going to turn them around. So if you see the most successful acquisitions that EMC or really any company has done, it's when they bought a market leader and then they've really unleashed the EMC sales force is, frankly, a sight to behold. If you ever want to see something sold, wow. And so that's one, is that the rest of the team can look and say, yeah, that's a really great product. That goes a long way towards really easing the integration of the two teams. I think the second thing that you do then, in terms of making the team feel good about the set of decisions is, there are times where you just have to be honest, right? And you tell the team, look, one of the reasons we're acquiring rather than building internally is, from a balance sheet perspective, there are certain things that you can do with an acquisition of a company that has revenue run rate that you cannot do by simply forking off 40 engineers in funding. And while that's not necessarily a pleasant conversation to have with the set of engineers that do want to go build that new product, when you walk them through the business economics and you have to say, look, there's a certain type of profit return ratio we're shooting for, they sit there and they say, okay, we get it. And again, accepting it, let's face it, engineers are the talent in a company like EMC. And you always have to be respectful of talent, right? Talent is different than, in any company you work in, and I remember when I was coming out of college, I interviewed at, in an investment bank that I won't name, Morgan Stanley. and I'm interviewing with their team, and we got maybe 15 minutes into the interview, and the guy I was interviewing with said, all right, what you need to do right now is pick up your stuff and run, don't walk to the door. I'm like, all right, so apparently this has gone really well. And he said, here's the thing, at Morgan Stanley, the traders are job one. They are the talent. We are the support. If you really care about innovating with technology, you need to get yourself out of New York, and you need to get to the Valley, and you need to join a company where you are the talent, because that's the only time you're going to see yourself treated the right way. So if you think about it that way, the engineers are the talent. So you have to be careful not to offend, but again, you don't want to treat them as if they're children, right? So you have to be honest. If you're honest about why we're buying it, the economic value, the technology value, that generally brings them in. And again, like I said, if you're buying the best of breed, which EMC tends to do, that also really smooths a lot of waters because that's a great product. Yeah, we'd love to work with those people because that's the last part, going back to people. The best likes to work with the best. The number one reason I see top people leave from companies that are acquired, both whether it's at EMC or the other companies I've worked with, it's because those people from the acquired company look around and say, I don't feel like working with B and C players. So as long as you have the best and you acquire the best, they tend to work together and say, hey, we can even do bigger things inside this larger organization. If you buy second-rate talent and have them work with the best, that's a problem. If you hire top-rate talent and all you have is second-rate talent, that's also a problem. So again, it comes back to really the people.
So I've had a chance to work with folks in your central innovation group, right? Very smart, very talented, very ambitious. But as we talked about in our little sidebar, as you described, sort of a mixed bag, right? On the one hand, everybody needs to think of themselves as being an innovator. You've got a central group that is driving the innovation agenda. There's a lot of innovation, internal innovation competitions. Just some of the stats, 8,000 submissions, 30 companies ultimately selected to be incubated, 300 invention disclosures, right? And roughly $200 million in incremental revenue. So there's certainly some numbers there. Where does that healthy conflict take place? What are some of the challenges in being in a product group, delivering product, and having an innovation group that is trying to also set the agenda? How do you manage that?
It's a good question. And actually, some of it gets to the heart of how I think of being a CTO. So, or really any part of the organization. So there's an individual that I ran into that works in our marketing organization. And And she came to me and she said, I feel like I need to wait for you or one of the other vice presidents to come up with a really bright idea, and then when you create that bright idea, then we can all go drive it. And I looked at her and I said, you know how I got this job that I got? I got the job by being innovative. When I was 23 years old, straight out of school, I was chock full of ideas, and I was writing code, and I was implementing them, and I made a difference, and I made things happen. And then I said, here's the problem though, I'm old now. I mean, not Mike old, but I'm old. More importantly, I'm not writing code every day anymore, and I'm not down in the trenches. My job isn't to innovate anymore. I'm not coming up with the next big idea. My job is to create a culture in which people like me 15 years ago can unleash their innovation. Just the way that the same people that created a culture where my innovation can come to light inside a larger company were able to do the same thing. And so when I look at the things like the Innovation Conference and the Innovation Awards, the value I've gotten out of that, and of that 200 million, I want to say 60 to 70 million of that's been driven through one guy in my group. We had a guy in the support organization that had a really, really bright idea. Putting it simply, it was leveraging big data analytics against a bunch of our systems to help connect with customers better, to frankly drive incremental sales. And he was in a position in the organization where that just wasn't his job. Right? His job was to handle support calls, and he only had so many hours in the day, et cetera, et cetera. And even had he implemented, he wasn't in an organization to enable that to be implemented. So what the Innovation Award did for me is it clued me in that here's a really bright guy that's not in the right spot right now. And we pulled him out of his organization, put him into mine, let him unleash, and the revenue rolls in. So as I look at things like the Innovation Council, or I look at, again, my job is to find the people who want to do great things, to find the people who want to do those things, and give them air cover so that they can make it happen. Because again, if somebody's waiting for me to come up with the next brilliant idea, EMC is in a lot of trouble. If someone's waiting for me, if someone comes to me though with a bunch of really great ideas, I'm more than willing to put myself on the line to give them the opportunity to be who I was 15 years ago. And that's really what we shoot for with a lot of these conference awards.
So, dating myself and maybe you as well, back in the day there was this little company called Iomega, which was attached storage that we would use to back up our PCs. Remember those? Yeah. And as you mentioned, EMC.
They were like heavy iPads.
Yeah, exactly. With a lot less functionality. But I think you did something quite astute. You went into a joint venture with Lenovo, who has proven themselves to be an extraordinarily adept marketer of consumer technology, low-margin consumer technology. But here you are now, you've got something like Mozy, which is, cloud-based backup. You are, I'm sure trying to address the Dropbox phenomenon. I assume you must have a Dropbox killer somewhere in the portfolio.
It's called Simplicity.
Okay,
Yep.
and was that an acquisition?
That was an acquisition.
Okay, so the whole consumer technology phenomena with Dropbox and Box and, although Apple's iCloud seems to be not delivering, so Apple's had a couple of black guys, but iCloud seems to be another area where they've been challenged. How do you leverage consumer technology design thinking, user experience? Because that wasn't necessarily the province of storage companies and backup companies. So how has that changed the way you think about things?
It's a good question. I think in a lot of ways, one of the things that I think EMC's done really well, and I give credit to Joe Tucci for this, is that if you look at EMC as a company, it's now actually split into sort of 3 sub-companies. So there's what we call EMC II, which is your traditional core storage, big boxes, $1 million price tag, the sort of things that if I drop it on you, you're dead, right? And I don't mean that, I mean actually literally, these things fall, you're dead. And then there's a second chunk, which is VMware, right? Which is 80% EMC owned, led by Pat Gelsinger, et cetera, et cetera. And they're really doing server virtualization, and really the core of it's software-defined data center, right? So let's stop thinking about the big, heavy, physical refrigerators and start thinking about the software that ties it together. And then recently, this new piece, which is called Pivotal, which is led by Paul Moritz, who of Microsoft fame, and prior actually, the VMware CEO. And that's really trying to leverage more of this consumer-grade approach, right? One of the things that Paul talks about a lot is 10 years ago, enterprise meant reliable and stable, and consumer meant a bit flaky. Now, in a lot of cases, consumer experiences far exceed their enterprise counterparts. Right? We don't hear about downtime windows for rebooting servers on your Gmail, and you don't have access issues, and you're constantly getting network problems, and a lot of the other issues that come up. And so, the way EMC looks at it is, first, we need to be able to leverage that intelligence in other parts of the stack. But the second one is, when you see great new innovation like that, like VMware, or like some of these big data initiatives, you want to let them run a little bit free. You don't want to burden them with some of the more traditional elements, which are still driving a ton of your revenue, but come from a very different mindset, a very different design center. And so when I look at something like Mosey, one of the key things, Mosey being part of my division that we're keen on is, Mosey, if you see something in the rest of our portfolio that you think is useful, you should absolutely pluck it. If, however, you ever feel like we're trying to force some piece of legacy technology on you, make sure to come and slap us around, because it's absolutely the wrong thing to do. So that's kind of how we look at these things, is you need to accept these new technologies, and you need to be willing to disrupt yourself. Because the line always is, and it's really true, if you're not willing to disrupt yourself, I guarantee you there's a whole bunch of startups all over the world that are willing to do it for you.
All day, every day. So I know we've run out of time, and I'm going to just take editorial license and ask you one last question, which is to ask you to share some of your own advice. So I loved your discussion about providing a community or an environment for innovation. So we've got students here from all of your primary geographies. Many of them want to participate in the innovation economy. EMC is as well placed as any company to continue to profit from a lot of the major secular trends. What advice would you provide to our Eastern European, our Chinese, our Indian, our Israeli, and our European students about what opportunities there may be within the EMC Corporation?
First piece of advice, bribe the government. No. Just kidding, just kidding. So there's a couple things. So, one of the stories I was telling Mike is when I first got hired, I got hired at a company called Network Appliance, who was sort of EMC's mortal enemy, but we'll ignore that. And I came straight out of school. And as I interviewed, it was actually a day and a half of interviews. Again, I'm coming out undergrad. By about the 13th interview where you're saying, well, I did an operating systems class and I make virtual memory, you start to feel pretty small. And there was one interviewer who said, I love the fact that you have no idea how to do anything. Because it means you don't have any idea how to do anything wrong yet. And he said, the other thing is, we keep telling you we want you to work on a product called Dump. And I'm pretty sure you have no idea what this is, but you keep pretending like it's your life's dream to go work on this product.
Good attitude.
Yeah, and I still remember, this was back in the old days, and I got back to college and went on to Alta Vista. For those of you who didn't know, Alta Vista was like Google, just without money. And I Googled, and I'm like, oh, that's what I'm working on. Turned out it was a backup, and it's spurred my career. But the key thing, but that was it, right? You're excited. You want to come work. You want to make a difference, and you come in with no preconceived notions. So if I had one thing for a piece of advice for anybody coming out, whether it's MBA or undergrad or grad school or wherever it is, whatever location you're going to be in, go in and say, look, I want to come and I want to make a difference. And no matter what job you get, and I guarantee you, inside of Network Appliance, working on Dump, there's a reason they got a new college grad who didn't know how to do anything, and they put him on it. It's because everyone else with experience they tried to recruit didn't want that job. And one of the pieces of career advice I've always thought is, if you take a job that no one else wants to do, the first thing you'll find is that you'll look great in comparison. Before, they had no one doing it, so you're totally going to look better than them. And the second thing is, if you make a career out of doing work that nobody else wants, you'll always find a niche for yourself. And that's true whether you're starting up your own company or you're working inside a large organization. if you can find those niches, you can really make an impact. And so that's what I look at, is no matter what site you want to work in for us, you know, the job that you're interviewing for, you may look at that and say, that doesn't sound interesting at all. But I guarantee you, if you dive into it, at a bare minimum, you'll make a good name for yourself and be able to find other things inside a large 60,000 person company, and people will be dying to have you work for them. And the flip side is like backup, a thing I thought I never wanted to work on. Turns out to be a $10 million plus market that skyrockets your career because, again, nobody else wanted to work on it. And the fact that I happen to be one of the guys who sort of knew what was going on makes me unique and interesting. Well, at least it makes me unique.
Stephen, you're a scholar and a gentleman for joining us on a late Saturday afternoon, early Saturday evening when Syracuse and Michigan are going at it right as we speak. So thank you so much for coming. Really appreciate it. So this concludes the formal part of our program, and I'm going to let my friend Tyler come up in a minute or two and talk about the fun activities that we can look forward to. But I want to just summarize just by first thanking three groups. I want to first thank our panelists and our speakers. Steve, I can't imagine how you sleep at night. And all of our speakers and panelists, the challenges you face to come out on a Saturday and spend the better part of 5 hours with us. We really appreciate your generosity. Secondly, I want to really thank those of you who are from outside the Holt community that chose to join us today. Holt is a very special community. I think you've gotten to see that. We really are a truly global community, and I think you're going to hear more from us in the world of innovation and entrepreneurship in the months and years ahead. And finally, I want to thank my students, Holt students. I came into San Francisco on the 1st of September to teach the first of a number of classes, first to my MBA students, and I think on day one, I challenged you. And I said that if we want to do this, we better get cracking now. And I look at the build event that we did in January, and I look at the event that we just wrapped up today, and I am so proud of you. You came to San Francisco to learn about innovation and entrepreneurship, and you know I've been a big advocate for not just learning in the classroom, but bringing all of the incredible richness of Silicon Valley and the Bay Area to bear on your education. And today is an extraordinary example of that. We talked about doing something unique. We stand for global business. We wanted to do a unique event, not like all the other entrepreneurship events, but really about global entrepreneurship. And I think that we've pulled it off with flying colors. So I look around the room at all of my students, not just my MBA students and my MSc students, but the MIBs and the MIMs, and I congratulate each and every one of you. Special thanks to Oliver, Mo, and Valerie for doing a really great job moderating. I think it was maybe the maiden voyage for each of you. You're all pros. But every one of the students that's been here, I know that you've got all kinds of stuff going on. I know that some of my MSCs came in today about noon. I hadn't heard from them. They usually respond to my emails like in 12 seconds. And to not hear from them for 12 hours is a real shock. So I know how busy people are. So it's been a really great opportunity to learn from one another. I think we now got a chance to go hang out for a while. So Tyler, would you please come up and talk about what's yet to come tonight? Thank you.
And thank you, Mike. He's truly been a mentor for all of us and a really special guy. So thank you, Professor Mike. A couple of other thank yous we want to give to some of our partners: Application Developers Alliance, Bay Brazil, Startup Monthly, the Russian Association of Communications Directors in Corporate Publishing, BAIA, STC, SV Forum, and the Relay Foundation. Also to Holy Craft Brewing Company, some of the beer you guys were drinking, they partnered with us, so give it a shot. It's really good. I'm heading there next. Just to give you guys an idea, the after party tonight is going to be at the Cellar Door on 3131 Fillmore. So pretty close to here. We're probably going to be there around 8 o'clock, so come check it out. We'll have some laughs and some drinks, and we'll talk about some of the cool stuff we learned today. So again, thank you very much, and thank you to Holt as well, who's been an amazing partner to work with on this event. So thank you, everyone, and have a great night.